Good morning. Thanks to everybody for being here. Don't really need an introduction, but I am Tracy Morris, Vice President of Student Services. And I'm here today just to kind of give you an overview of what we've done in the past couple of years, especially this last year, with regards to strategic enrollment management. So I didn't do the slides because my slides are very text heavy, and it's really just to kind of guide. I'm just going to hit some of the points. If you're interested afterwards, I'd be glad to send you a copy of the full plan, because we do have a pretty good working draft of strategic enrollment management. So thank you for taking time this morning to be here. Who knows what strategic enrollment management is? Kind of. Emily, you better raise your hand. Some of you have been on these conversations. But when we first talked about, one of the first things we do in the plan is really to outline what SEM is. It will identify specific areas that we're going to focus on over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, even up to 5 years when we get to that point. It coordinates efforts. This is probably one of the biggest things that I'm going to talk about in a minute that we really need here at ICC, which is that coordination of effort. We know that people are doing great things over here and great things over here, but we don't always make those in a coordinated fashion. It's going to define specific goals for enrollment. This is not about maximum enrollment. Strategic enrollment management is about optimal enrollment, which might mean we focus on this population or this program versus just more. And Dr. Quirk-Bailey hit that this morning. It develops that strategic view of enrollment management. Some of the basic areas are recruitment, intake, onboarding, persistence, and completion. So as we go through the plan, there are different parts that we focus on at different times. It's also going to identify some measures and create some monitoring systems. And so this year, currently right now, Dr. Fleege is the primary holder of that data. And what my vision is for this year is that we get it so that it's a little bit more broad, and then eventually the entire institution would be able to pull up on their dashboard where we are in terms of enrollment. And then creating recruitment strategies that really help students to choose the right programs and getting them to that credentials for a family-sustaining wage. So you've heard that quite a bit. This was written a year ago. And it's all kind of come into the same themes that we heard this morning from Dr. Quirk-Bailey. So really kind of having everything coalesce together is a great thing. ICC's history with SEM. I would venture to guess that we have a long-standing history, probably about 50 years, worth of implementing good changes. Implementing things that we think will make the process better for students. The problem was it's not been systematic. It hasn't been cohesive. Sometimes, as they said this morning, sometimes we think we know what is best, but it's not necessarily based on data. So the example Dr. Quirk-Bailey offered this morning about the students who are always late. We think it's because of this, and it was actually a transportation issue. We see that a lot with our students. So we've been doing great things, and we continue to have people do great things. What SEM is going to do is help us to kind of look at the data a little bit more, talk to students, and then make recommendations in a more systematic way. So back in FY16, it actually started in fall of 15, and then in spring of 16, the board started asking for this information. So I started doing a little bit of education with them about what is SEM, what could it be. And back then, we wrote up some basic goals. So I just kind of wanted to share a few of those just to show that a year and a half ago, before we started down the actual Strategic Enrollment Management Task Force, these were some of the things that we had. Defining and capturing student intake. My first year here, we spent about a year talking about intake. What is it? We had a one-size-fits-all checklist. So it didn't matter if you were a visiting student from Bradley, a student transferring in with 50 hours of credit, or a brand new first-time freshman dual credit student. They all were told the same thing. And that was a problem because students would be like, I just want to take a class. So back then we talked about what is student intake? What does that look like? What do those people need to do? And we had I think it was an AQUIP team, who did that. And then it sat. But it was done. We also wanted to talk about having communication paths so that based on whatever intake you are, you would get kind of a personalized checklist. In FY17, or back in FY16, what we said we would do in fiscal year 17 and last year was to create a new dynamic application, to do an advising overhaul and project, to do some enrollment projecting for the first time, instead of just saying, we want what we had last year, to really look at what was realistic, what happens between first day and 10th day, what kind of drop-off and adding do we have, and then setting specific target-based goals. We wanted to evaluate the work from the year before, and then we had hoped we'd have a dashboard of metrics that we could evaluate. And then we said, okay, by that time then, by FY18, we'll be ready to do recruitment and retention. Don't know what that is, but we're going to do it. So how have we done? 4 of them are done. Yes, we've always continuously quality improved them, but we've been able to capture the student intake at a better rate. So right now we have 4 major categories. We have one for visiting and professional development students. Non-degree seeking is what we call it. They don't know what that is. We have one for degree and certificate seeking students. We have one for visiting students, the students who's just gonna, did I say that one already? See, this is why I need a PowerPoint. One for visiting students, one for early college, and then we're working on one for international. So that way they get a different set of information that can guide them through. And so if you've done the new application, we ask you not to do it in live, but at the end of it, you actually get a personalized type checklist telling you what your next steps are. So we were able to get that done. The communication paths, these are still getting better and better, but everybody gets the first initial email, has your user ID and your student ID number immediately upon matriculation. So immediately, if you have never been in the system, at the top and the bottom of the hour, you get it. Then your second email is your password. So as Arnitria shared with me, that is stuff that we now get into students' hands immediately. So if I did my application right now, by 11:30, I am matriculated, I have the information, I can go test and I can go. That includes international students. They used to not be able to do it because of no social security number. We'd have to make a fake one and then we fixed that. We still have some issues to work with, we know that, but we're getting better. And they get their ID right away so that they don't have to have a fake social security number for a bunch of stuff. The dynamic application, we are doing a session on that tomorrow to really show a little bit more about it. But what is really cool is if I say I'm a high school student right now and planning to take classes in high school, I don't ask them for all the other stuff that they didn't need to fill out before. Because students would get so confused, like, why are you asking me what colleges I attended? I'm 15, I'm 16. So it actually adapts and changes a little bit to those questions. If it says that I'm an international student, it will ask about visa information. But if I'm a native student, it doesn't. It requires social security number for them, offers it for other students, because some students do have a social security number based on what type they are. So it's pretty cool. I'm pretty geeked out about that. And then enrollment projections and targets. So for the first time this year, we actually projected a 2% increase. But we didn't just throw out 2%. We actually dug into the data, and you're going to see when we get down the road a little bit, we were expecting this many students from this population, and this many here, and this many here. So it was a little different approach to setting enrollment projections. The 3 that are still in process that didn't go forward, we really haven't had time to evaluate the student intake because it's only been in place for about 2 months, 3 months. So this year we will do some evaluation of those categories. Who are we missing? Do we need to separate out degree and certificate seeking students or not? Advising, talking this morning, achieving the dream and strategic planning, advising is one of the big ones. We've tried, I think we've had 3 Six Sigma teams and a whole bunch of other conversations. We really need some guidance as far as what are those best models. So that is going to be a real big initiative this year.
Can I ask a question?
You bet.
What's the student intent process? You mean deciding whether there's degree or certificate seeking?
That's part of it, yeah,
Okay.
intent.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we just didn't know.
No, what they really
Yeah.
want
Yep.
from us. Okay.
And they would free-form app in their major,
Yeah,
the
I know,
program of
yeah, I
study,
remember
and that was
that.
just a mess. So we kind of, what are you here for? And then if you're saying you're just coming for a class,
Yeah.
we're not going to be hounding you for graduation. We might bug you a little bit. We might not hound you. And then development and evaluation of the dashboard of metrics. So as I said, we've got some of that stuff. Cheryl's got a really cool infographic that she shared with Strategic Forum a month or 2 ago, tweaking that so that everybody has access to that. So that's still in development and working. So considering back then it wasn't a real huge systematic effort and we've only had 1 year of SEM, we didn't do too bad. Where I think we can do better is to share this information with people so you guys can give us feedback as we go forward into 19. So one of the first things we did as an SEM team was to come up with our strategic vision. So we took a day. I gave them some homework. We talked about what are those key things that we hope to do. So I tried to do it. I wanted to automate it and have little flashes, but it didn't work. So we've got yellow. So comprehensive and integrated approach. Huge. once we get going with these things, it needs to be faculty need to understand, staff need to understand. Even the example this morning about the guy who was cutting the grass, got off of his mower to tell students how to get there. You want everybody to understand where we're going, and this is kind of the first step with our huge audience. To achieve effective recruitment resulting in optimal enrollment, I talked about that. It's not about more. We got to get people where they need to be. Enhancing student success. Of course, we all believe in that very heavily. That's why we're here. And then it's a dynamic, evolving, and proactive process. So the goal with it, this year we did our FY18, and it was kind of a fast because we were kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of setting our goals for this current fiscal year. But my goal is that you will always have this year's, and then you're looking ahead to the following year, so you have an idea, an eye on the future. So you should be 2 to 3 years out, and that evolves and changes. So if something big changes, if we have another huge layoff in our community, you say we need this. It's not locked in stone, but it can evolve. So those are kind of the boiling down all the research on SEM to kind of what we want to do as a team. I don't know what I did there. All right. So then we talked, that is the right one, okay. So then we talked about what were we going to do. And so setting those measurable goals based on data. So we had, some of you may remember, we had the Claris Corporation come in and do a really massive overreaching look at all of our data and different things. And I think the full thing is like 300 pages. So as a team, we took a chunk at a time. And I'd give them homework. Okay, we're going to read this. I mean, I was really like a taskmaster. We're going to read this data. And then we're going to come back and discuss it. And we went through almost the whole 300-page report. So I'm going to give you glimpses of that data. That's why these are so heavy slides. But based on internal and external data, and then eventually getting that process for monitoring our progress, which is that sheet I talked about with Cheryl. Developing the approach to enrollment management, including identifying the role of faculty in academic scheduling. This is one that I probably see as happening in FY19. Dr. Owua is here now. We need to give him at least another week or two to get his feet underneath him as we start to talk about that. But this is not just about what is student services going to do. It really is engaging faculty in those conversations. One of the key pieces of data, and I can't remember the number, I think it's later on in the slide, the percentage of our students who have to travel to multiple campuses to get a schedule was staggering. Multiple campuses. So they are taking classes on at least 2 different campuses. So they are here in Peoria, or they're here in Pekin, or at the Pekin in Peoria. I mean, it really was a staggering number. So one of the first voyages we took into this academic scheduling is that the deans were really challenged to come up with one package at Pekin that could get a full-time gen ed track at Pekin. And so they were able to do that, put it in place in the spring for this fall. They also identified a couple programs for evening students so that can be completed at one campus over a period of 3 years. So it's just a different way of scheduling, but they were kind of like one-off pilots. So when we talk about this down the road, much more engagement with the faculty in terms of, okay, welding. How can we schedule welding in a way that's easy for students to kind of be advised into welding? And Stacy's really excited about that opportunity as well. And then making recommendations for the strategic and the fiscally responsible allocation of financial and other resources. Money. The application cost a lot of money. It was absolutely worth its weight in gold because last week we had 0 applications in the queue waiting for processing. Usually this time of year we're 3-4 days behind, minimum. That was something that was really recommended from this team that we knew we had to get done. So as we go forward, whether that's bringing transcript evaluation in, whether that's buying a different scheduling software, whatever that is, this team would make recommendations because we don't have an everlasting bucket of money. Wish we did, but we don't. So really kind of making recommendations to whoever that is, whether that's Mr. Buddy, whether that's cabinet, whether that's whatever, how we're going to use our money. So who's on this team? These are kind of the pockets of who's there. So we have people from every area, but you have our names here as well. We did have faculty representation. And I think that even if the faculty couldn't attend that meeting, Margot, Grant, really gave us a lot of information. So we really need to get 1 or 2 more faculty members on to continue that, as well as Margot and Grant. But they read through it and they gave us different perspective on how we do things. We had recruitment, we had student success, so kind of a broad-ranged goals. I don't know how this mixes with the new strategic planning team. Our makeup might change this year because with those teams, as you heard this morning, you can be on one. So I don't think that means I have to lose these people, but those are pretty significant times. So we may see. So if you walk out of here and you are so excited about this and you think it's so awesome and you want to be on it, let me know. So basically, we did a lot of homework, pre-reading, et cetera. But the first step really kind of was for us to look at our data. And we just didn't have the systems in place to really have that robust data analysis. So we brought in Claris Corporation. They did a lot of work for us behind the scenes and then came out here, brought the findings, had discussions, and then wrote us that big, huge 300-page paper. We've all seen this ugly, terrible drawing. We are at the point from back in the 70s in terms of enrollment. We are hoping and pretty confident this year, and this is one of the places where my presentation glitched out this morning, that we hopefully at minimum will have stemmed the tide and be flat, if not a little bit up. So this next week is pretty critical for us in terms of dual credit and then enrollment to see where we land. But we've seen those things changes. Now, if you look right here, this was an unprecedented recession. I don't think any of us want to go back there. I would love to have more students, but that was a terrible time for our communities. So we really need to figure out where is it that we need to be. What is our capacity at Peoria campus? What is our capacity at Pekin? What is our capacity here? Because there isn't a lot of growth we can do right now between 9 and noon. We're pretty full. It's looking at those alternative methods. So this kind of just paints that little bit of a picture. So one of the first piece here really dealt with that high school market. So I just kind of picked some of the pieces out, and I really did cut and paste them in here just to be able to discuss them. At the high school level, we do well. We do above national averages. We are around 37% to about 30, but that's still, even at 30, which is low, it's higher than the national average in terms of high school. We have done well. We have programs in the high schools. We have our recruiters who are actively in the high schools. They are captive. They're there. We know where to find them. We've done really, really well there. But the way that Claris really kind of talked about it is that idea of diversification. If you're doing your retirement package, you don't put all your money into one stock, even if that stock's doing really well. Because if that stock tanks, we have seen enrollment in high school number of graduates decrease. That has nothing to do with us. That is the population. When I started in higher ed 15 years ago, one of the first jobs my boss gave me was to get some information on demographics. And I remember back then looking and saying, oh boy, when these kindergarten first grades come through, we're going to see a hit. Because it was like this. Guess what? That is right now, the last 3 years. The number of possible high school graduates has dropped. So even as we drop a little bit in terms of down to 30%, we're getting 30% of a smaller number. So it's kind of like a double hit. So what they really said is we have got to diversify. We've got to spend some more time on adult students, non-traditional students, in addition to our high schools, because when the high school, and now the high school number is going to start to climb here in a little bit. My daughter started high school today, and this is the largest class they've had, I know, the largest class they've had in, I think, 7 years in a freshman class in our community. So we're seeing that uptake. I only cried a little bit today. It wasn't too bad. So overall, student enrollment has declined 16.6. What has been really unique is that we have dropped everywhere. We have not just dropped in high school, we have dropped across the board. And that's what's been, unfortunately, very, very unique. So when we look at that, the good news is there is some opportunity. But as we drop everywhere else, this one really talks about that over 22, that's where we've dropped the hardest. We're still trying to figure out a little bit of why. And I didn't get into all the data, and there's lots and lots of stuff up here, and this is all in the areas, but it really is that 25 to 35 age range. Part of that is that we have not offered consistent evening scheduling for students. If a student wants to take evening classes, they either have to mix campuses, they have to take day and evening, and we've made it so hard that unfortunately in some programs our competition is eating us for lunch. So really, the business program is one of the first ones, and then there's an accountancy, I think, certificate at Pekin that's coming in. We added another LPN at Pekin as a way to kind of address some of that. So that's really a pretty huge implication. That was a real startling one. We all knew enrollment had dropped, but when we saw that it was in every single area, and then that one piece, it was like, wow. So the deans really responded well to start that conversation about how do we find some other opportunities for that population. Developmental, two-year completion rates are low. We know that. As a nation, we know that this is a crisis point. And because we have them take all those developmental classes, it doesn't help them to break out of that cycle, and it doesn't provide that foundation. So what we found is completion rates, African American students, we know this. We're improving, but we need to put resources here. I don't have to speak to you guys. You know that. That's where our program has been centered. 20 to 29-year-old students, 12% completion rates. Pell Grant recipients, students with the highest financial need, 19%. And part-time students, there should be a space there, 15%. So when we started this conversation, the burning platform that I used was full-time, we're doing great. We're up around national averages. Part-time students, whew, why? We don't know for sure, but why do you think we might be doing poorly with part-time students? Scheduling is an issue for sure.
They have work, I mean, so if they can't do it at night, forget it. I mean, the part-time might be.
Well, that gentleman on stage today, how many hours are you working? 50 to 60?
Yeah.
How many hours are you taking? Almost full-time?
Yeah.
We see that with our students. So they have their life stuff. But also, part-time students are not required to see an advisor. They are not required to go to orientation. They are not required really to do anything. We don't have a lot of contact, and our hours haven't served them. Engagement, getting them to engage in stuff outside of. I mean, a number of the students on stage are non-traditional students. They're here because they engaged with something. Trio, athletics, nursing. I mean, they have all their stuff that kind of goes on outside of. We have to find a way to engage them. So the implication on this is that developmental work leads, and actually I think these numbers are persistence to completion for developmental ed only, not overall, just for developmental ed. But that completion of developmental ed work. So Joe is working with some of the high schools to do some piloting in the high schools with math. Jennifer is working on some ways to kind of fast track using that ALP model to fast track get students through developmental ed. We've got to find a way to serve our students through there a little bit better.
Have you, to that slide you're looking at, and we sort of explored one, have you looked at any of these others, like why are 20 to 29-year-old students leaving us in developmental if they just don't have the patience or time? Or
Yeah, we haven't really dug into it that much. What we had hoped to do with persistence and completion this year was really to look at part-time students.
And Pell Grant, is there money running out?
It does. That we've known, especially with the new caps. So trying to find ways to pull them through faster.
So that's,
And I said yesterday we had a person who was 094, math 094, and English 095. That's 11 hours.
Yeah.
That's a whole semester of that. So I know they're looking at trying to find different ways because that uses up one whole semester of Pell.
And I know for our, some of our 20 to 29-year-olds, that's kind of the age range where people look at you and say, you're still in college. And they start feeling that pressure of, I'm treading water, I'm not doing well, I'm just gonna go get a job.
yeah.
And then about 31 is when they come back and say, oh my gosh.
I need to do
can't
this.
get it.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think the other part of it is I want to be in classes that are meaningful to me.
Exactly.
So if I'm in welding, if I'm in HVAC, if I'm in whatever, I have a brother with a learning disability who needs hands-on learning. If he would have had to sit into developmental ed to get to his truck driver classes, he wouldn't have come back. And I think some of our students, if we could find a way to mesh, okay, I can take my introductory architectural drafting or whatever and a developmental ed, they're really successful. And they've seen that model with GED. We're going to talk about it a little bit as well. So that's a great question. So again, this is, and Dr. Quirk-Bailey talked to the first point this morning about the low number of individuals in our service area who have a credential. And we've got to flip that number. We've got to get to where 60% have it and 30% don't. So this is really just some data by county. They did look at that educational completion and determined our students are going other places who charge more money. CNA was one of the very few that we are still maintaining that over some of our competitors here. But when you talk about truck driver and welding and some of those, students are paying more, companies are paying more to send their students elsewhere because they can get through faster, even though it costs more money. So we've got to look at that a little bit more broadly about how can we deliver this better. Yeah.
Do we know that it's because they can get through faster? I mean, we know it's more expensive. We also know, like, is it intake? Have we checked their intake processes and so on?
It's probably that too. That really, they do more of the case management model, which is as soon as if you've ever filled out an application for University of Phoenix or something like that, they are on you until you, and
Cheryl
they
Casey
do that.
talks about that with Walden, where she attended, and she said, oh, they are so like,
The big box of
come on
stuff.
down, and, I mean, they are,
Yep.
of course, if you're paying for that
Yep.
service, but that's.
And I don't know what data there was in that, but we have heard anecdotally, they're easier to work with, they make me feel wanted.
Oh, yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure
boy, they do.
Right,
They do, but it is also the multiple start dates, and they have flexibility that we don't necessarily have. Because they charge more, they can do that.
Sure.
So really trying to find ways to expand these programs where demand exceeds supply, and to recruit into programs that have capacity. So this programs that have capacity, we're going to talk about a little bit, GMA, SEP, and automotive. Both were like, we're on board, we'll try, we'll go. And both are full or almost full. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we had Kathy Swanson, part 2. Catherine Swanson, part 2. The first consultant was Kathy Swanson, the second was Catherine. Different people. But she actually came in and did an onboarding review that we're still in the beginning of really sharing this out. But she looked at from application to enrollment. Talked to students, talked to staff, talked to faculty. I mean, she spent a day and a half here talking to people. And we had 3 full classrooms of students in addition to some other stuff. She looked at our forms, our processes, and some of the things that she said that we've already done. Extended evening hours for service during peak times. So we've been here till 8 o'clock on Tuesdays. We're looking at expanding to 7 o'clock here all year round, 7 o'clock on Tuesdays. 7 o'clock on Tuesdays all year round, and 7 o'clock on Mondays all year round at Peoria. And then only during peak times, January, August, July, being open that one night a week till 8 at each place. And we found, last week I didn't leave till 20 to 9 because we were finishing people up and getting them through. And so we found that students really are responding well to that. But it doesn't need to be all the time, because when we're open too many nights, then students are so sporadic that we're kind of twiddling our thumbs. So it's really been a very concentrated effort. I'm kind of mad I forgot to bring my tennis shoes today, because we'll be running the entire day. Student services are really hopping. So that was a recommendation from her that we found. Implement the online application. I've already geeked out about that enough. Rotating enrollment services coverage to address phones and to serve students. What we really found with the way our layout is, students can't tell that we're helping a student on the phone. So they're looking like, what are you doing over there? Why aren't you serving me? So what we've actually done is we've pulled some staff to the back line to do phones so that the people sitting up front can serve students. We're getting ready to gut that entire side of the building. I'm so excited because we're going to change that so it's a little bit better. And get rid of that counter. We've also implemented a new phone system. It has not been without issues. I think we're starting to solve some of those. But what has been really interesting is now as we've rolled into it, prior to the drop for non-payment week, we were having 60-70% success rate, service rates, which we know was not happening before. Because before, everybody was going into voicemail, and then we were pulling them back out and trying to call them. Well, by the time we got them called back, they had already called again, or they got. So we found that we're being much more responsive to the phones. Drop for no pay week. Was it 294 calls in an hour and a half? Just to the one number. It didn't matter how many people I had, we could not hold up that volume. So we've got to look this year about how can we get other people trained just for that little bit who can do the things. I mean, I sat and answered phones for 2 hours. I took a lot of messages because I don't have capability to take payments or read aid. So I was probably not as much of a help as I wanted to be, but it really showed me what that looks like. But the volume, we have great data tracking. So admissions is on there, financial aid, and enrollment services is all on that.
Was there comment made about the drop for no pay policy?
That's actually on here.
It
When we get
says
to tuition
eliminate
due date.
re-enrollment. I know we used to have that like little penalty fee.
Yeah.
But what about when they dropped for no pay? I mean, I think we didn't recoup about, we had like.
We usually recoup about 46%, and as of last week, we were at almost 40 already.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
so, I mean, but,
That's right here, actually.
oh, okay.
For this year, we are absolutely going to start talking about this, because there are some schools that do more of a rolling, I'll just jump to the bottom, do a rolling drop. So you register here, you have 3 business days to pay, or set up a payment plan, and you're out. That's almost too aggressive on the other side, because our students in need can't do that.
No.
They don't have a checking, they don't have the cash, whatever. At IVCC, we had one big drop, and then every Wednesday, we dropped. So if you registered on Thursday, you had 6 days. If you registered on Wednesday, you had till 7 p.m. don't want to go that way either. So what we need to do is figure out what that looks for us. So I've got a proposal I'm bringing to Cabinet, we'll share a little bit more, about a way to make this a little bit more of a rolling date while still giving students time to get their financial aid done. But it's got to be more simple. Because right now we push that big drop back so late because we want to give them as much time because we don't do another drop. And then we have more students who are not in there. So we've got to do a drop for non-pay because there are a lot of students who just change their mind. And we don't want them to have to owe, and they're holding the seat. So we're looking at, this was one of our recommendations that we've got to do is a simplification of that. And so we'll be hopefully rolling that out in the next few weeks. Because you're right, it's confusing. If you've seen the due date thing, it's confusing. And the goal is to give them 2 weeks, but it's 2 weeks from here to there. So we're going to clean that up, and then it'll give a little bit more of a rolling due date so that academics can plan ahead as well. Newly designed enrollment services financially combined office. We are basically taking that whole side of the hallway and changing it. So I'm really excited about that. Updating equivalencies in PeopleSoft to improve time to transcript evaluation. So what this means is we've taken our top 6 transfer in schools and they've automated equivalencies. So now, somebody like me, student worker, for those schools, Heartland, Eureka, Bradley, I don't remember, I know they're working on ISU right now. We can enter in the theft and you hit this and it brings it all in as ICC credit. So instead of having to do that manual evaluation, which has created our backlog, that's awesome. Eventually, I would love to have it where it comes in digitally, scrapes it off, and pops it in. It would change our time a lot. But this is a good first step. Improved communication and contact plan for onboarding. We've started this. Cheryl and I worked on a really detailed calendar of here's what we do here, 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 here. When do we make phone calls? When do we do call them all? When do we do mail? When do we do email? When do we do text eventually? And we've got it kind of planned out for the year. And then we just have to have somebody to execute it. When do we do that? Enrolled in fall, but not yet in spring. When do we do that? Who does it? And tracking it. Excuse me. This spring, we're going to do some awareness campaigns about technology. We've done a little bit with our mobile app. We've got a new message center coming where students will be able to actually get messages on their phone without texting them. Because you can't text them by the law unless they say yes. But message center, they can do it. So it's almost like an app notification. That'll be coming out in about a month. We'll train you guys on it, and then we'll get it out to student. And then an improved degree audit. I'm so excited about this. It's kind of sort of out there. We're going to push it this fall. But if a student is doing the degree audit in their, I don't know if it's in the mobile app or if it's in e-services. I think it's e-services. And they're looking, it says, I need one life science. I can go on there, and I can look at it. It takes me to the schedule, and I say I want this, and I can register from there. Really awesome. Really awesome stuff that's easier for our students to use instead of having to look at this and then go back over here and try to find it and go back and forth. And I believe there's even a graphic that says you are 68% to completion. Really cool stuff. And also students will be able to be in more than one program of study pretty soon. So that if they're in stackable, if they're in 2 certificates and a degree, we'll be able to do that, which will open the door to graduation online. Awesome. And then tuition due dates. So some really exciting stuff this year, and this is more onboarding stuff that she said. It gives it that emphasis so that we can move forward. So that's all part of what we're talking about in terms of strategic enrollment, but also then we had to define our markets. So the first thing she did was she had 3 pieces of the student lifestyle that really resonated with our team. So all of our goals this year, next year, going forward, will be in one of 3 categories. Recruiting specific market segments. So this year, our emphasis was really on those adult students. It was really on GMA, SEP, and automotive. Very specific markets. Enrolling applicants, this is really what we consider onboarding. So from application to enrollment, how do we pull them through? And then retaining the people who are here. And this one actually was the softer one of all these because these 2 needed so much work that we had one goal for this year in terms of this. This is something that we've been working on and we've been talking about a lot. I like the word persisting, but that's what she gave us, so we'll go from there. So we also need to define what ages, so we were all kind of speaking the same language. So early college kind of broke into that 17 and younger, which are the students who are taking it while they're still in high school, as well as that 18 to 21-year-old young adults. They're not early college, but they're right after that. So we were talking about that younger population. And then we talked about, I think that was going to say high school, and then I think it just auto-corrected it to early college when I did a replace. So that might be my bad. Adult market segments, 22 to 34, early career. We usually talk about non-trads and we just lump them all together. They're different. So when we came in our first set of data, we had these huge numbers because a lot of them were up here. We will get some students here. And I love having these students here because they're really here because they want to be here. But really our focus is on this early career, mid-career. 22 to 34, 35 to 49, those are going to be your students who really are in dire need usually of getting some transition help, maybe full-time if they were laid off from their job. And then, yeah, we might do some focus here, but really, so we really wanted to use our language a little bit differently. But when we looked at the numbers, we were like, wow, there's no way there's that many students out there. And a big chunk of them were here. So then we set some goals. Oop. So the overall goal, what this chart here is that 2% increase. And that 2% increase was really a heavy thing when we thought we weren't going to have a budget at all. I mean, this was really kind of what we needed that we thought we could reasonably do based on the data Claris gave us, plus what we thought it would bring into the institution. But we gave ourselves numbers. So census day numbers, the 2% target increase. So you can see for summer, I don't know if I can, is there a little light there? No. You can see the number right up here, 368 credit hours is what we would have needed on top of last year. Fall, and then spring. And then the other thing we did was we had census day target and opening day target. We did some evaluation for the first time. What percentage of credits do we actually lose between first day and census? And it was pretty consistent. So we based it on a 3.9% attrition for summer, 2.77 for fall, and 1.94 for spring. So it was the first time we actually looked at that data, because we always say census day, census day. We didn't know what that change was. So it was kind of an interesting exercise for me, who is not a numbers person, to give me a feel for what we were looking at. So what did those goals look like for this year? So you guys have on the table these goals in a little bit more detail, but I figured and you can take them with you and look at them and give me feedback. But the first one was to increase adult enrollment in targeted evening programs designed to be completed at one location. That hits like 3 things that we were talking about earlier. So their implication and then the data, really this year we have a business program that can be completed at Peoria, a business program that will be completed here at East Peoria, and then the accounting certificate at Pekin, as well as the LPN at Pekin. And those were designed as part of this goal to help us get the first steps in that thing. And what's interesting is it's an associate in applied science and business, but we're working with UIS to try to capstone it so that they could get their bachelor's degree in this community. And that's one that I think will be really good as we build it out. And you also know which day. So I think it's on Mondays and Wednesdays. You know that from here on out, that's what your schedule's going to be. Increase in adult enrollment in targeted evening programs to be, that's the same one. Okay, GMA, SEP, and automotive. For programs with good retention and have capacity, doing just a little bit of individual marketing. So we did some geofencing at the auto show. So when people were at the auto show, we gave them little reminders about, hey, check out these programs. What we also found is we tried broad geofencing, and that didn't work as well for this population. We really needed to target in on those areas. And basically that just means if I'm there and I have my phone, an ad pops up for ICC. Oh, kind of Big Brother-ish actually.
So geofencing, you mean like at the auto show, those were the only people that would receive that? That's what you mean by that?
And then it can follow them after.
You're hooked now.
You're hooked.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting. We did some of that with the high schools in more of a general market, but it really was very successful for this group. We also redesigned the GMASEP website. If you haven't checked it out, it's awesome. It starts off with like videos, and it's big, and it's bright, and it's flashy. And we had marketing materials. So what Cheryl and her team is going to do then is we now have a template. So the next round of people will do the same kind of thing. It won't look exactly the same. It's the same concept. So if we're looking at like a surge tech or a phlebotomy, we might geofence some hospitals. Or if there's a lab site. So there's really some cool things that we can do with it. And this was the first one. They were excited about it. They've been thrilled. They also did a little bit of a pilot program where they have kind of a tentative waiver on the reading requirement. Because back in the day, students, it was a lower reading requirement, and they got through. So they have some conditional admits where they'll allow them in with that lower reading score, and then we'll do some data collection. And I think they're really, really excited about it. Yeah.
I didn't know if you were talking. The geofencing thing, can they, I'm just curious about this, how does that work? Like, could you go to that other college, Midwestern, and geofence those people?
Hypothetically, of course you could. Hypothetically, you can. These are public broadcasts, so I'm not getting into too much of the data about what we do, but you could geofence anywhere.
Dirty pool?
It could be considered that way if you did it. It's also, just like putting a billboard up by one of your competitors. They've done it to us, we've done it to them. It's kind of the same concept. Yeah.
But a little more.
A little bit more intrusive, yes. Yes. And it's not super, it's expensive, yeah. It's expensive, but it's usually a good return on the investment because you're kind of getting to where they are at. Yes. Did you have something?
For gym and stuff, did they I teach their social science class, right? Did they start doing it where it's entry in fall and entry in spring?
Not yet. And I believe that there's some issues with lab space, is my understanding, that it's been a challenge because you have your labs all during this time, then there's no off time. But those are certain opportunities. And I think even within our welding, we tell students they can start in fall, in August, and in January. We have the capacity, with a few little tweaks, that they should be able to start every 8 weeks. It's just the way we package it. So I think we really have we let them start every 8. But I think we can broadcast that and package it better and really move forward. So, good question. Early college students applying for the Pell. You guys have heard me talk about the Pell Grant Initiative. We're one of the few sites in the United States that can give Pell Grant to high school students. So I know our numbers have well over doubled, but part of that is that now students with free and reduced lunch are directed to Pell. The good news for students is that now they have it for tuition and the money for books, supplies, transportation, that before it was just free tuition. I'm really interested in seeing how this works for the year and then going back and debrief on it. Because it has the front impact of they have to do the FAFSA. And you guys know, you're seeing it in the high schools, I'm sure. So we need some more digging into this. But at least at first glance, we're seeing that more and more students are doing it. And some of the students are really appreciative of being able to get a laptop or whatever. So we'll see. And I think our early college numbers are expected to increase this year. You never know when you change something like the free and reduced lunch. Currently, the career tech ed, I think, is still waived and separate. That may change in the future, but.
Does this count against your total Pell
eligibility? It does, but it counts in a prorate, like you're only part-time, so you only use part-time dollars.
Okay.
But the whole idea is to really accelerate it towards completion. Yeah.
And students who are dual credit still pay tuition here too?
They pay half of the previous year's tuition.
Okay.
So it's half of what, because it used to be full price for some and then free for others, so we kind of met in the middle. So actually, if you get 6 hours of Pell, you're getting it at half price, so you have more money in your pocket.
Okay. And are they still working on trying to get, isn't it like District 150 to be able to cover the cost of, because most dual credit, or maybe not.
No, we're really just trying to be I think that's part of the program that we have, is really trying to get more and more of them to apply for the FAFSA to find out that they're eligible.
Okay.
Before it was, I think everybody was classified as free and reduced lunch because of a grant program that they had, and that really kind of made it hard for Pell, because they don't know if they really are truly at that income level. So in the second area, we talked earlier about the 2 areas. Second area has been enrolling applicants, and I'm going to kind of speed up a little bit because I'm talking too much. Increase adult application conversion rates. This has been a lot harder to measure than we thought, but the whole idea was that high-performing schools are around 60%. We were at 28%. So of the students who applied that we actually enrolled, it was a very low number. We also found that a lot of people were just using our application for practice. So we've developed a practice site so people can use it for practice that isn't for real, but it gives them the practice. We had people from outside of our district trying to use it as practice. So we're looking to try and pull, and Dr. Quirk-Bailey talked about this morning, pulling them through that funnel. And then we talked a little bit about that auto-matriculation. So even right now, we're over 50% of automatically matriculated at the point of application. And I think if I take out the first 3 weeks where we did all of it manually, I think we're over 60% are auto-matriculating. And some of them are people who were here before, changed their name, and we just have to do a little bit, and we're usually getting those, I think, in July, 85% or 90% were matriculated within 1 business day. So, pretty cool. GED conversion, this is an area that, our conversion rates were less than 1% in fall 2012. That was a real whoa. But what I think it is, and I know recruiters have tried to do it, and our program staff have tried to do it, to get in there. We go in and we say, hey, come to ICC, we've got blah, 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 we got 500 million things you can do here. And the students are overwhelmed. Some of the most successful programs from the point they started with GED they start to do either a career exploration class or they start to talk about intro classes in like 3 programs. So they have bridge programs. And while you're still working on your GED, you can take an intro to automotive tech, an intro to welding. And some of the most successful in the state is Lewis and Clark. So this year we really want to look at Lewis and Clark's model. What can we do here? Because we know our GED students, a lot of them want to come, they don't know what to do. And when we walk in and throw everything at them, I think our recruiter's words were, we throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. She's absolutely right, because we were overwhelming them. So as we saw that number and we started talking about it, we're like, okay, what can we do? So this year, we're going to start talking about that planning so that we can really hit those students. Now that we know we got our funding back too, that helps. They did improve a little bit, but we've got some real opportunity here. Increasing early college matriculation. This is one of those things we kind of just, we would do all this work with them for early college, and then they wouldn't get into our list for orientation. So they just kind of get lost. So really taking the group and doing some targeted approach to them on, hey, we're glad you started with us, finish with us. And talking to them and helping to move them forward and making sure that they get to go through orientation. So pretty excited about that opportunity here because I think it's an untapped potential. And then in terms of retention, this completion concierge in the last year, I think we graduated right around 60 students. All we did was look, and they'd already met the requirements. So we sent them something, we got them graduated, and that was really great. In fact, one of our potential board members actually did that as well. She's like, oh, I didn't know about that program, and sure enough, she had completed, so we got her graduated, which was pretty great. But what we're going to do this year, we need to do this still. And right now, we're very short-staffed in advising, so it's not happening right now. What we really need to do is look a little bit farther back and see those students who are maybe halfway and say, hey, we know that you're almost done. Come on back, let's help you get finished. What do you need? Where can we fix? And we just haven't done that. And that's where I think this year we really need to, it's this stop out. Finish what you started, come on back, we want you back, whatever we call that. And then the ones who are within 10 hours of completing. We tried a little approach with this. We had a little bit of success with it in the spring, but we were almost too late because we couldn't adjust schedule. So you almost need to have these conversations in September, October, so we know what they need and we can pair them up for spring enrollment. So I'm pretty excited about that. As far as measurement, for summer, we met 93% of our target, which was a 2% increase. So we ended up just about 1,000 credit hours down from prior year, but we didn't do anything really different. Those are easier to make up, so we didn't freak out too much about that. Right now, as of this morning, or yesterday morning, we're at 88% of our target for fall 17, which is the 2% up. Right now, today, according to David's stuff, we're up 5% from last year. But they're still, we did the drop a week later last year, so we're kind of still playing a little catch up. In order to hit that 2% increase, we're still short about 9,900 credit hours, which sounds really high. We got a lot of dual credit still coming in. I think we're still anticipating like 5,000 to 6,000 credit hours in dual credit. And if we have a Tuesday like we had last week, that was 1,900, it's very easy. It's possible that we can hit this. So we really just kind of need to, everybody here, we got Tuesday night, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday enrollment, and we'll see kind of where we fall. So GMA stuff, and I didn't have access to the data, and poor Cheryl was running around doing everything else, but I believe last time I saw, I think we had 4 spots left in automotive, which is double what they have had in previous years. And then GMA stuff, I think, had 1 or 2. And then the improved homepage, if you haven't looked at the new homepage, it really is pretty awesome. That's part of our session tomorrow with the application as well. But you can actually compare programs. So you can do the search programs, and you can compare like programs, and it'll give you a 3-column comparison. Pretty cool stuff for our student. And then what we'll do is evaluate our goals and look into FY19. This was going to be the really interactive part, but of course I talk too much. So on your sheet, I do. Oh no, I wanted you to talk. I didn't want to listen to me all the time. So what do you got here? And some of it's kind of small, so I can send it to you via email. It's in color, but I like everything on one page. The ones that are in white are this year's current goals. And then the ones that are gray are potential ones for next year. So I've got your sign-in information. I'll give it to you so you can look at it and make it bigger because I know my eyes are going and I can hardly read it. But we talked about this year's. So then next year we're talking about increasing the number of early college students who get to 15 before they graduate. 15 is that magic number for a lot of students, and if they can get to that, they're likely to persist. So looking at some of those schools that have fewer than 15 potential hours, how can we get them another class or 2 via online learning, via a structured supplemental instruction? How can we get them to 15? And then talking about the reducing the percentage of the community with no degree, no credential. We talked about that already. Looking at those CTE programs at the dual credit early college level. We have some great opportunities that we just haven't had. That's why that workforce realignment is so important. And then with the matriculation. So you can see, you've got your big goal, you've got your objectives. The gray ones are still up for discussion. So once we survive the beginning of the semester, SEM will start coming back together and say, okay, how are we doing on this old stuff? Yeah, what do we need to do on this stuff? And start asking more questions. The next page, see it's stapled funny here. The next page talks about, increasing that adult application conversion a little bit farther. That's why that need for that admissions office is so critical right now. And then really digging into that GED number. We just didn't have the time and the energy to do it right, so we pushed it off to this year, which I think is a good move. And then the last one, again, talks about the persistence rates. So take a look at this, look at it, give feedback. If you say, well, I don't know, why are you not doing this population? Or we're open to that conversation. If you're really interested about SEM, let us know. We'll probably have some changes on the team, so if you're really interested. But take some time to look through this, ask questions. As you see more questions, or as you see more things as you deal with students, shoot those to us. We have a whole big parking lot of things we want to talk about. So, awesome. Yes?
I have a question. The classes that they can take as early college are basically classes that they can also find in high school, is that correct? I mean, we don't go off of that menu. In other words, we couldn't offer Arabic or Chinese?
I think there would have to be critical mass. I think we try to focus on the ones that are the most transferable or that go directly into the credentials. So I think if you had a school that wanted to do an Arabic, I think if you had the mass to do it, that'd be awesome. If we ever get to where we have the virtual.
We have a free Arabic instructor who's going to arrive in 2 days.
Oh.
And we sometimes have free Chinese instructors that are here from our Chinese Language Institute. So
I think that'd be something to share with Kay, so that as they start having conversations with schools, if they have maybe like a Richwoods or something, if they have a program where they want to do international business, I think they have that in their IB. Maybe that's an opportunity. But Kay kind of is Kay, Judy, and Lisa are the coordinators there.
Yeah.
I just know they have it. But I would think any school that if they have a high Arabic population or a high Chinese population, would be great. Or a school that wants to promote that, like maybe a Dunlap wants to promote that for an international business, I think it'd be great. Awesome. So thank you guys so much for coming. I'm a few minutes over, so if you're going to 12 o'clock session, I apologize, but you'll get your evaluation in, and
I will take your evaluation.
yep, we'll take them for you. All right, thank you.